Hi, my name is Georgina Paskogan, and I am the co-founder of Final Bow for Yellowface. And welcome this morning to What's the Tea, a daily conversation with a dancer of Asian descent during the month of May to celebrate Asian Pacific Heritage Month. In these discussions, we want to highlight the achievements and experiences of Asians in dance. And today, I am so excited to talk with not only a friend and former company member, but also the director of Ballet, Edward Liang. Ed, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to give you a chance to call out a donation for the company or any other organization that you choose.
Well, I'm just grateful to be here. Obviously, I've known both of you for a very long time, and I am just grateful for this platform and grateful that you two are giving voices to Asian Americans in this art form and hopefully beyond that gives us presence because we do exist.
Absolutely.
I think that during this time, every arts organization is suffering and needing help. So I urge everybody to support, not only monetarily, but just in terms of when we do open up, or if there is videos that are out there in the community to view and still participate in the arts, because it probably means more now than ever to keep our humanity. And what better way to celebrate our humanness by the arts? So if people feel the urge and want to, please go to www.balletmet.org and you will see a page where there's a whole list of ideas where people can help.
Thank you, Ed. So just to jump right into everything, we talked a little bit before we record, but what are you missing right now in this situation we find ourselves in? I mean, you have a super busy lifestyle in general now that you're a director. How is this of you?
Well, it's such a big change of it's like a culture shock. Most days I'm surrounded by people from early morning. I usually start my meetings, whether it's 8:30 in the morning with finance committee or, executive committee, to different phone calls, breakfast meetings. And I usually work until 6 or 7, and then I come back and either finish out my emails or have a dinner or cook people dinner that are a part of Ballet Met community or guests. So it's a busy time. So this is a big switch to do all this virtually and try to teach classes upstairs in my office. I laid down some Marley and I teach 2 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then now I'm going to start teaching worldwide ballet just to support some of my friends. So it's such a culture shock. But on the positive is that it's been a really amazing time to be able to self-reflect, to be able to hopefully nurture yourself as a spiritual person. So meditating, I haven't had much time to meditate, or exercise. My husband brought up our mountain bike from the basement and put it on trainers. And so I've been able to bike at least 45 minutes to an hour each day. And it feels amazing to sweat, or to be able to plan lunches and dinners that takes a little bit more time, and explore, I would say, some of these recipes that my sister and my father and my mother used to make. Chinese cooking there's a lot of prep time and a lot of chopping, so nobody has time for that. So now I have a little bit of time to chop and saute and fry. The other day, we in our grocery haul, like every 10 days, I would say, we went to this amazing Asian supermarket, and I found these river prawns, frozen river prawns. And my husband sees me like jumping up and down in the aisle because I haven't seen those in a long time. So I brought them home and clipped them off. But these river prawns, what's great about them is that they are obviously large and they have so much flavor. But in Chinese fashion, if you clip off the tip of the shrimp, clip off all of the legs and the huge arms, and you deep fry them, you peel off the head, and I love eating the inside of the head. So it has been incredible having that with rice and like little bits of caviar and things like that, and having watercress and just having, I would say, Chinese comfort food that I haven't had in years.
Oh, that's amazing, Ed. I love that. And can we do a recipe trade, please?
Done.
I would love to have some recipes from you. Well, that's incredible, and that's such a wonderful hidden positive in what's going on to be able to connect, and you also reconnecting to your body makes me saying that makes me super happy, because that's the one thing that I find that I'm missing is like that we're such tactile creatures, dancers, artists, and that's been stripped away in a sense, and finding ways to like virtually communicate that and practice our art. It still misses something. Like I miss sweating next to other people. I'm like, it's part of the grit, and it's also it's like special sauce, if you will, since we're talking about food of ballet. So I'm going to have you rewind. I want to hear a little bit about what made you start dance training.
I started dance training because of my sister. My sister was taking ballet at the time, and I caught on because I was a mischievous little kid, and my punishment for some bad actions was to take ballet classes. And, you know, my sister and I are super close, and we did a lot together. Even though we're 4 years apart, she's older. We did martial arts. We did Kuksul One, which is a Korean martial art. And the reason why my parents selected that was because it was a Korean martial art, like some sort of martial art, and it was the closest one to us in the mall. So we decided Korean martial art. But in Liang fashion, we tried horseback riding, violin, piano, swimming. But what really stuck for me was ballet. And even doing the martial art, my sister and I, we were already ambitious when we were young. So we became competitive martial arts champions. And she was really good at the sparring. I was more interested in the forms, which is basically combinations. And combinations are exactly what ballet class is all about, memorizing and perfecting technique. And so that's how I started ballet. And that's what actually kind of kept me in ballet, was just it not only fascinated me mentally, but physically.
Yeah, I totally resonate with what you said. Was there a specific moment in memory where you were like, hey, I'm gonna go for this as an actual career. I want to be a professional dancer?
Yeah, I think that happened like around 12 or 13. And that's when I decided to audition for a New York summer intensive. So my first audition was for the ABT summer intensive. And this was back then really kind of a rebranded ABT summer intensive. Baryshnikov started this program where it was very select. I think there was only 15 participants, 15 to 20 participants, male and female. And they paid for pretty much everything. And they also wanted to start a year-long program that was intensive like that. I didn't get in, but I got into the School of American Ballet. And that's when I found out that, wow, there are tons of kids of like mind and of like passion. And that it was the first time that I realized that I could actually make a career out of this, and that I was surrounded by people that were the same as me in terms of interest, passion, and want and desire for something different. So that was when I kind of decided that I was going to make a go of it.
Yeah. And I also felt that when I went to SAB, everyone was so as serious about ballet as I was. And then that made me feel like very much included and not so much like the outlier. Can you speak to me about...
I actually have a question for both of you as SAB alum for both of you, and also maybe slightly different times. What was your experience arriving at SAB as an Asian American? Like, did you notice that? Was that an issue for you? And just kind of curious what that experience was like in those early days.
My first experience at SAB was probably different than Gina's, because back then in 88, 89, they didn't have dormitories. It was I would say it was a completely different culture, because we shared a common lounge with Juilliard, so we had a lot more participation than we do now. I mean, there is participation at the Rose Building, but it felt like there was less space, so people really interacted with a lot of Juilliard students. And everybody went back to their apartments that they rented. And I don't know if it was because I was so young. I was 13, about to turn 14, and living in New York City was already huge in a big change, cultural change from Marin County, California. And I didn't really notice, to tell you the truth, until a little bit later. And I was just kind of wrapped up in my own sort of world and just trying to assimilate and get ready and work hard and just be in awe of this whole Lincoln Center and New York City Ballet institution. But it was later that I kind of realized my difference.
I can speak to the sense that the summer courses felt, for me, it was like a mishmash of, because we took over the Juilliard dorms. The dorms had been created by that point in 1999. And so there was a lot of like people doing different stuff, lots of interaction. And during the school year, I feel like I remember having some connection to the Juilliard students at that time. But it's also just like in just teenage havoc. I mean, I think I'm one of like 5 or 6 people that was the group that changed all the co-ed dorm rules during the summers of 1999 to 2001 and the subsequent winter years. But it wasn't like And I also had Alan. So Alan was someone who I had known since I was a child, since we shared teachers through Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet. And so like Alan kind of always being by my side, like I felt even if I didn't like cognitively think that, like I could always look to him and see something reflected back at me. But like Ed said, like it didn't really, you know, you have all those pictures up on the walls of SAB, and I don't think it was ever really like acknowledged in myself until I got into the company that I was like, oh my gosh, none of these ballerinas look like me. Not one of them. And then as an apprentice, Aisha Ash was the closest person that to like bring me into, and she was very kind to me, and Ed, and I had Ed, and I just kind of looked up to Ed and was like, well, he's here, so we're gonna get this. But this is a good lead in. Ed, will you speak to our viewers about your ethnic and cultural heritage, and to what degree do you feel connected to it?
Well, I feel extremely connected to my heritage because it was really important to my parents. My parents were immigrants coming to the Bay Area. You know, I think my parents were very lucky where they were extremely educated. And my father started with his business partner, started a branch of a shipping company. And so I didn't have the typical, I would say, immigrant childhood upbringing, whatever that means, typical. There was still a lot of assimilation that we were trying to have. Marin County, I think within our area, we were the only Asian family. My parents came from, a background of means, so it's not like as if we were struggling, but it was always going to be a struggle. And I didn't quite understand all the things that my parents said until I moved to New York and figured out that I was different. And I didn't realize that I was pushing when I was younger in terms of accepting who I am as an Asian American male. So it was extremely important. I'm fluent in Chinese. My sister is as well. We always ate Chinese food at home. We had Chinese homework. I think it was very important for my family to understand even just Chinese education in terms of poetry and history and folklore and art. So that, I think, never leaves you. How your parents raise you and some of the emphasis of importance never leaves. I really believe regardless of what family you're born in, half of it is genetics and half of it is a social construct. So we're this sort of social construct that your parents and your environment fills to create who you are as this being. So I was able to, through time, I was able to at least recapture, this sounds so weird, and I'm sure you both will identify, recapture my Asianness, my Chineseness, and understand what that means and still continue to process. Even to this day, I have to catch myself in social programming of not feeling good enough or not fitting in or being alone, or it's a constant battle that I think that will always be with me. I don't know how other people feel. I can only speak for myself, but it is not something that all of a sudden you could just be like, I'm confident. And because the world around you does not reflect even what the moments that you have of clarity, that you get bombarded with other information that makes you feel differently. That's important.
That was a beautiful, beautiful answer. And I know that you and I are of different generations of dancers, but when we overlapped, one super special moment that we had was during the fall gala. You had premiered your ballet, and I had done Lovitz, and it was, those nights are so filled with so much energy, and you and I connected in passing, and you gave me your eyes, and we just had this moment, and it summed up, I might cry, it summed up everything of that, the feeling alone, but not, it was like everything you just said was expressed in that look. And I don't know if you felt the same thing, but that's what I felt, is just, wow, here we are. And what a special moment, but also what a weird moment. And how much is this done for display, and how much of this is merited? Like I went through a lot of those feelings, but, I will never, ever forget that shared second we had on that evening. So it's very clear that your ethnic and cultural heritage is so important to you. Can you speak a little bit to how that would inform your work as an artist and now possibly as a director?
Well, I find this whole topic, feeling, experience, my life, your life, everybody that's connected through this experience. I think that the answer is, without it being like vague, all of us are a summary of our experiences, and that is emphasized when you are an artist. We, as artists, I believe, are born to this world to be able to create and express. And I was in Singapore and creating a ballet, but I also was invited to this thing in Singapore where it's the Singaporean Arts Festival. It's huge. And there was this topic called conversation. And I was kind of floored that I was invited to speak in this symposium. And it was Li Huaimin, which is the director of Cloudgate. I believe it was Akram Khan was there. So they had all these huge artists in different forms, film, and I was floored. And this, I think, is the real answer to this, is that, of course, who I am as a Chinese American who was raised by two Chinese parents would, of course, be, I would explore that in my art and as a person. But what was astounding to me, even in an Asian symposium, I was asked, because I think that there was some hard questions, and they asked me, because I was not born in an Asian country, how Asian was I, and what type of Asian art would I be able to produce? And of course, being sassy and just, I got triggered. So I kind of answered back, and I said, just because I'm a Chinese artist and I was born in the United States, do you expect me to only create and identify with Asian art? Or is my calling only to create Chinese ballets or Chinese themed ballets? You know, my idea of creating art, are you going to ask some potter that they can only make Chinese vases and that they can't explore any other thematic ideas? And is my only identity going to be to basically prove to you all that I am Asian, when because I'm not homegrown or that I was not born in China or Asia, that somehow I've lost my Asianness? So there's these conflicting areas where it's even more so sometimes when you're a Chinese American. I was born in Taiwan. I moved to the United States when I was 5, but still that's not enough. So I'm not really fully accepted in the United States or European descent country, and yet I'm not fully accepted back in Asia because I didn't start my craft in Asia, or my full career is not based in working in Asia. So it's this weird limbo state that I've always lived in, whether it's in my career as a dancer, as a choreographer, and then now as an artistic director, because I've never thought of myself as this, and it's not an ego trip in any sort of way, but I have to capture and really identify and say, I am a pioneer. And I think all of us are, because I'm in this weird sort of state where I'm not accepted here, I'm not accepted here, and you have to find your own road. And that's why I decided to, leave New York City Ballet and go to Broadway and try and explore, because, becoming a principal with New York City Ballet was always my goal and dream. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to attain it, whether it was because of my own merit or was it because what I look like. I will never have the answer. And I stopped having that answer. But what was important to me was to try to do everything that I possibly can in the time that I'm given. So being on Broadway, dancing in Europe, trying modern companies, being a choreographer, and now being an artistic director. It's lonely, but you just focus on the fact that I want to take it outside of race. I want to take it about myself as a Chinese American choreographer, artistic director, that I want to experience and do everything that I possibly can with the time that is given to me, whether it's by the universe or with dance careers, it's even more finite because it's emphasized by your body. So
right.
I am not an artist that is only wanting to create Ming Dynasty vases or Chinese lamps, and I am not Oriental, where these labels or identifiers, and just I don't want that in my life. And what's crazy about this is that it comes from, quote unquote, our own demographic of people. And that I think is even more sometimes not talked about, because we have our own biases and our own parts of how we put each other in the box, because that's what we learned from society.
So I have a kind of a follow-up question to that. I think that's beautiful. And I think that really eloquently sums up the experience of a lot of people who are sort of neither and both at the same time. I've also been kind of struggling with that and have recently described myself as both. So giving me full ownership of both Chinese and American culture, as opposed to having to choose between one or the other, like the sort of optical illusion where it's both an old lady and a young woman at the same time, but it's just how you look at it but it's still the same image. So to follow up on that, to dive a little deeper, I too have been thinking about this work and how we are focusing on Asianness, and I'd prefer to be working on my own creative projects and not having to have this burden of addressing race and representation. Like, wouldn't that be nice? But like, the reality is, like, we're here, we're loving soldiers for this cause, and one of the flip sides of this conversation of Asian representation is like, okay, so we have more Asian dancers on stage, but where are the Asian choreographers? Where are the ones telling the stories? So in terms of being informed by your Asianness, your experience with your Asian parents, the way you've had that Asian relationship with them, when you depict a mother-child relationship on stage, it might look slightly different than what Ramatsky does it. And he has a Russian experience. You'll still be able to identify mother and son or mother and daughter. But yes, the approach to it, I think, your way of doing it will probably have a Chinese flair that Ratmansky's will not. And I think there is value to giving oxygen to your way of doing it. So zooming out from that idea, I can count on one hand the Asian choreographers who have made work for a major ballet company, and you're one of them, and the others are mostly dead. I don't see that very often. So when we're thinking about those subtle things that give that Asianness on stage, whether it's homegrown or Asian American, we don't see that on the ballet stages. So as an artistic director, and someone of Asian descent and a trailblazing Asian American choreographer, what do you think the ballet world needs to do in order to make more opportunities for Asian American artists in this field?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
I think, truthfully, it starts with arts education. And as an artistic director, and most artistic directors are tied with their academy. And, you could look at it in so many different ways, but it's about education. You have to educate, and in a broader sense. Okay, let me see if I can explain this. Not only do you have to educate the younger generation about the arts so that this art form will exist 50 to 100 years from now, because anybody that you invite or let children explore arts, especially, let's say, dance and ballet, they will be 10 times as likely to try it, to buy a ticket, or to support this art form. So that is the basis of our future as a whole. If you dig deeper into this, it goes into education of youth, is finding talent in young, aspiring dancers that are of Chinese or Asian heritage. Educate more of their parents and invite them to let their children participate in the arts more. I was very, very lucky where my parents were open-minded, where it doesn't go into the cliche of Asian parents wanting their children to be doctors, lawyers, and back in the day when architects used to make a lot of money, architects. But it's really about education, and then having that versus just giving opportunities here and there to what you would consider choreographers of color, where I think that that will have much more impact in the broader scope versus just inviting voices like mine to be a part of different companies, because that ballets come and go. And this is such, this is such an ephemeral art that, yes, you can videotape and have archival videos. And now, especially with what's happening with COVID, that a lot of companies are opening up their archives to be able to keep presence within the world and the dance landscape. But I think giving voice to other choreographers that tells stories of Chinese culture or their background, because it's impossible, like you said, Phil, that you are not putting who you are as a person and as an artist on stage. But I believe the core mission or the core thing that is going to make impact is by inviting more Asians to believe and that want to explore this art form or other art forms as a career and as a vocation. That will change the paradigm, because more is more. But when you have choreographers, once a season or a couple times a season, let's say in every company, that still won't change the conversation. What really changes the conversation is starting with ourselves and educating our children and our population that you can. And, Gina, do you remember, I know that even within your generation, when we were in SAB, we did lecture demonstrations, and we would go to different schools. We'd wake up at, I don't even know what ungodly hour. And we would all pile into a van. And I was like 16 right before I got into the company. And I would have to do cortege en gloire, which is, that's the last thing that you want to do at 9 a.m. with boots and white tights in front of elementary kids, white tights. But I would say the thing that mattered most to me, that was like an explosion in my head, was the times that we for 10 minutes, you would have a moment with these kids and they get to ask whatever they wanted to, right? We put on our normal clothes and we got to go out there and we answer questions. And kids would ask, what is your underwear made out of? Is it made out of leather? And we would answer, trying to answer these questions educationally and let them ask ridiculous questions. No, it's not made out of leather. It needs to be like a jock strap or any sort of athletic underwear. So it needs to be breathable. And leather is not. But
although I have seen some rhinestones. Different. Breathable.
But there's breathable, but then it also scratches not only yourself but your partner. But anyways, I digress. The biggest aha moment was the fact that these kids got to see a 16-year-old boy that had a bowl cut, that could not afford to get a normal haircut, but that was on his way to being and wanting to be whatever he wanted to be. And so that type of aha that I could see in their eyes has always kept me inspired by talking and educating the next generation, because that's where it's going to make the most impact, is when people realize and generations realize that these boundaries, that we truthfully, in the end, regardless of projection of other people, these boundaries are also handcuffs and boundaries that we put on ourselves. Because I can't control how other people perceive me. What I can control is what I allow in and what I allow to take me down or make me feel less than or a part different than or not a part of. So that was super long-winded, and I'm so sorry, but I think that makes what I want to be a part of and what I want to see in terms of change a possibility.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of Gina and I's work around Asian representation is like, if you are that person who wants to participate, that young person, and then you show up for the Nutcracker and you see yourself mirrored back as this sort of caricature, you question whether or not your place there is valid, whether or not you belong, whether or not they will ever see you as you and not just that. So I think that's been sort of two sides of the same conversation. So kind of continuing that idea, do you have any like embarrassing stories around Yellowface? Do you have a Nutcracker story that you care to share? Because I think one of the things that we've heard is that, well, nobody else is bothered. There's no Asians who are bothered by this. You know, tons of Asians dance tea, and no one speaks up. So there's no problem.
Well, I'm the artistic director of Ballet, but the Nutcracker that we do here is not my production. So I only have a certain amount of, I would say, control over the production. But because of the work that you guys do and the platform that you're giving this, I'm going to be quite honest with you, is that this is what was the emphasis and the ability for me to go and change the makeup of not my production and say that this is what is happening in the world and we need to change with it. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of what you guys have done. My own experience just is, let's just say that there's been times where people have asked me to put on more makeup so that I looked less Asian for a character, or whether it was a character for Bluebird or Oberon or anything like that. That, I would say, has always stuck with me. And if I were smaller, that would be my first role that they would have given me in Nutcracker. It's not like as if they didn't try. Don't think that they didn't try to shove me into that.
Oh, come on.
It's just because my torso was too long and I'm 6 feet plus. So I couldn't fit into that box, but literally don't think that they did not try to shove me in that box. It wouldn't work. The box always had a little bit of a head coming up. So I don't know if it's
maybe if they lost the Fu Manchu, there would have been room.
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea, but apparently, my ballet helmet head kept that door open. So I have no idea. But that, those experiences definitely make you feel very different. Or, and I've been asked this question in interviews that have, for instance, I've been asked for interviews for a New York Times article about, being the first Chinese American artistic director. And those stories are killed because nobody wants to explore it. or that they don't get, they don't get bought, or however you want to. I don't know what the lingo is for the industry, but these things stay with you, and these experiences make you more of an artist, positive or negative. Some people would be very deterred by this. It did hurt me, but it only just reinforced the fire that was in my belly to persevere. So you can look at it in many different ways, where I really believe, and everyone has sort of like spiritual bent on this or not, that I really believe that I was born into my parents' home, and I chose to be born into this experience to learn and grow in whatever package that we grow up in, because there's going to be lessons in all this. And throughout this, so far, there's been really hard lessons being a Chinese American and being an artist, and having to be labeled by what you look like on the outside, because we're a visual art. You can't hide behind just anything else, because we use our bodies to explore who we are and explore, I think, the language of the choreographer. And even being a choreographer, I thought that it would be different in terms that it's not me on stage. It's just my work and my voice and my ideas, but it does. It's in every sector of the arts and in life, because I don't know how to change this, and I hope that through education it can. But if you think about it, I say this to dancers I work with, I say this to people that I collaborate with. If you span the room really quickly or slow, doesn't matter, and you look around your environment or any environment, we are label making machines, and our mind doesn't stop making labels. So I don't know, if not being in my own eyes, what other people do when they span the room and they see me or they read something, what type of label they create for me. I sometimes have an idea by their actions, but I'm just hoping that with the work that you guys are doing and what we're all trying to explore, that at least it gives us presence and acknowledgement, so that people will keep this in mind, that these labels are being created. That's the most important thing to me, and wanting to participate and being a part of this conversation of right now, or the bigger scope of things, that it's not this hidden secret, and that it's not this thing that we don't talk about. It's happening, and it's real, and it's okay. But the only way to move forward is to acknowledge it, and to acknowledge that it happens. And then as a collective, we can explore on how to change some of this.
Right. You hit the nail on the head on so many issues that are happening in the ballet world now, what the ballet world needs to do to change. And I just want to take this moment to say, I'm so sorry that you experienced that question that triggered you, and that just you talking about this right now is helping change the paradigm. Like this is going to reach so many people like you, me, and Phil, to realize that they're not having this experience alone in this ballet world, and and I'm really grateful that you're doing this. So imagine that we're at French roast again, and it's like tiny baby Gina. What would you say to a young dancer like her now? And she or he is looking to have a career in dance.
Oh, I would, especially if it's baby Gina and we're at French roast, I would give baby Gina the biggest hug and try to push as much love and support towards this baby Gina. Sorry, it can make me a little emotional, but whether it's baby Gina or somebody else, is that what I would say is it's going to be okay. Persevere. Let it affect you and learn how to let it go, and use that feeling for fire in the belly, because we all have something to say, and this is not for nothing. So I think this road or this career is so amazing, but yet at the same time, it is so hard because it's the entertainment industry. And not only are you labeled, but it's all about luck and timing and relationships. It's a tough business, but the platform that it gives you as a human, as a soul, and the voice that you can have if you're relentless in your pursuit. And that's why I say, whatever experience that you have, good and bad, use that as fire in the belly, because as human beings, it's really about resilience and determination, because taking outside of race, we are always going to be confronted with challenges. It's what we do with these challenges, and they feel horrible, and sometimes they can be disgusting, but when you look back on those horrible experiences and you're able to, I would say, reform this toxicity and create it to what's going to work for you, I feel as if that's success.
That is so beautiful, and thank you. I'm over here crying. Don't mind me. I think we have had the most beautiful discussion, and I think you've answered all of our questions so thoroughly. I just want to thank you again for tuning in, everyone, and Ed, from the bottom of my heart. This is so special to finally get to do this. And Phil, thank you for helping in.
I'm so proud of you both. I'm giving you guys a Corona big bear hug.
I am feeling it. Make sure to check our Instagram page right now for the reveal of who the next Dancer Chat will be, and tune in tomorrow at noon Eastern Standard Time for the next conversation.